Welcome to Shambu Sessions Artist Spotlight. I'm your host, Shambu, and today I'm joined by guitarist and composer Todd Mosby to talk about his remarkable new album, American Heartland, releasing April 3rd. Many of us know Todd for his expansive new age and acoustic guitar work, but this new project feels different. It's jazz-infused, rhythmically alive, touched by Brazilian-style vocals, and recorded live at the Village Studios in Los Angeles. The album also features superstar players of jazz, rock, and fusion. Todd, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Shambu. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is an incredible album that demonstrates your musicality across genres, from your guitar playing to your arrangements. I got to tell you, the songs are superb. And before we talk about it, I want to start with your early years growing up. When did you start playing the guitar and getting into music?
I've always been into music, but I would say that it started at a very early age with my great-grandmother. During Christmas, she'd always bring over instruments. Whether it was harmonicas, toy pianos, with the color coding on it, little xylophone, things like that. And I remember very early always wanting to be able to write musicals, because musicals were big back then. That was my first intro to music, and I loved the sound of that. And later, I even have a picture of my father giving me like a guitar after the Beatles came on, I go back that far. But when I was in high school, I started playing acoustic guitar, and we get together at parties, and then some people would have acoustic guitars, and so we'd start playing tunes of the day, Neil Young, folk rock tunes like that. But then I was even in a washtub bluegrass band. We started, I was playing banjo, flute, acoustic guitar, all those kinds of things. The bluegrass revival scene was big back in the 70s, early 70s. And that was a part of my kind of background. But I didn't really start my formal training until my first year of college. So essentially, I consider that when I first started my path in music. And that was the first time I actually had, a solid guitar lesson. I was playing in ensembles, and I got the feel of what it's like to play with other people. And that was when I kind of decided I would follow this path.
Did you dream about becoming a musician growing up?
I dreamt about a lot of things. Army, musician, president, whatever. In high school, that there was a critical moment that I decided, well, if I got to be here on this planet, I might as well do something I like. And that's when I decided to check out music. And that's when I went to my first year of college in Utah, actually, to study music formally and just make a decision, well, is this something I want to do? And I decided, it was a very great program. I said, yeah. So I wound up actually applying to Berklee the following year, College of Music in Boston. That led to another 3 years of formal study.
Good for you. And you have your master's, right, in music?
Yes. The pathway to that was I came back to St. Louis after Berklee, gotten a couple of, like a new wave band, the Talking Heads. A lot of music was breaking back then, and I wanted to get all the jazz out of my, just leave that behind and just really sift into what I learned and how to explore that in my own way based on the library knowledge I had. What happened was before the masters, I wound up mentoring with a lot of people privately, locally, because back then St. Louis was kind of I want to call it a small university of people. There were not many, but there was a handful of key people I was able to seek out to learn composition with. So I wound up studying composition with Dr. Roland Jordan. I wound up studying jazz guitar with Rob Block, and actually went on to study, be mentored by Rob Block, Mike Stern, Fareed Hawk, Jim Kelly out of Boston, Rick Hayden.
Wow.
And these were, not all at one time, but through a 10-year period. And my largest mentor was Ustad Imran Khan, who was here in St. Louis, and I was able to study 13 years with him traditionally. He worked out my left hand, right hand coordination on the instrument, gave me new, basically sitar techniques to play. We designed a new instrument together. That pathway led to the history, philosophy, and technique of classical North Indian music, which is kind of the style of heavy hardcore improvisation. Not Carnatic, that's the vocal part, but North Indian, which is performing raga music.
So let's jump into the album. American Heartland feels very personal. You grew up on a farm in Missouri. Is the album a reflection of where you came from?
Yeah, I would say definitely it is. Half the time was spent on the farm. My parents' family farm, my grandparents had this in rural Missouri. It was a working operational farm, you know, hogs, cattle, horses, you name it. And so I'd spend summers out there working there, but I would spend winters in St. Louis. So I St. Louis County. So I had really had the best of both worlds, and that is a total reflection, where you live. Not only was I just living that, I was equally at home running rivers, like canoeing. That's a big thing to do in Missouri. There's rivers everywhere. We don't have an ocean, but we have rivers. Hiking trails, camping outdoors, running cattle. And when I was in high school, being involved in the social scenes there, like I mentioned earlier, for playing at parties, getting together with people, just having fun, doing what kids do, hanging out with friends. And my background here was very multicultural, I would say, growing up. And even in my music, when I decided to stay in St. Louis to develop a career in music, very multicultural city. I mean, it's amazing. It's like almost like a small world. And I was open to accessing it. I took full advantage.
So this album reflects Missouri's deep musical lineage, blues along the Mississippi, Ozark bluegrass, jazz legends like Charlie Parker and Lester Young, even rockers like Chuck Berry. Did those artists shape your musical landscape?
I would say they did. I remember going to Chuck Berry concerts in high school in the 70s. And also, I had a friend of mine, I would go over to his house, and his mother actually used to date Norman Granz, who started Jazz at the Philharmonic. So she had all these albums of, that era originals, and Billie Holiday, The Prez, Ella Fitzgerald, Count Basie, you name it, all the people that were on his roster, we had access to. And she would even tell us stories, we'd sit down and get drunk with her, and she'd like tell us all these like crazy stories from New York City and being around this incredible music at that time when it was blossoming. But but one of the first people who I met when I came back from Boston was Johnny Johnson of Johnny B. Good, and he was playing locally in the clubs and stuff. I was kind of hanging out in that scene. I'd bring my guitar to try to sit in, to try to meet people. And he was like one of the first people that actually let me sit in. Him and Gus Thornton. Gus Thornton wound up was the bass player for, oh my God, many, many, many blues artists. Bottom line was that's kind of where I started from. And then from there, I was able to dive deeper and deeper into the jazz tradition from the people that actually shaped the music in the 50s, that some left and came back, some never left, like Joe Charles, David Hines, great trumpet player. I became a first call jazz musician in St. Louis. This was about 1994, and I had about a 20-year run. I just hired the best musicians I could because I was basically a subcontractor, and I paid them to teach me essentially. So I learned firsthand jazz like that.
This album has so many styles, and I can see why because of your background. But I can hear jazz, Brazilian, tones of Steely Dan and Donald Fagen, Earth, Wind and Fire, roots music, all kinds of stuff like that. And it was 3 years in the making. Was it the writing, the arranging, the gathering the players, or the vision? What took so long to put this album together?
First, let me say, as a working musician in St. Louis, or anywhere for that matter, as a jazz artist, you are immersed into these traditions. You have to know how to play bossa traditionally, the original version of it. That led me down a very long road of research, but you have to have the chops to play this music convincingly, to continue to work and be respected by the people that you hire and get called back for more gigs. So this is more out of a survival thing that I learned how to play Brazilian jazz. Steely Dan I grew up with. Earth, Wind and Fire, I mean, eventually I wound up doing wedding band gigs towards the end of my 20-year span, but for the most part, I was doing straight ahead jazz gigs, and they paid very well. I researched Joe Beam, Gio Gilberto, Hermeto, Flora Purim, Elis Regina, Toots Thielmans, Milton Nascimento, These were all part of my catalog of songs and part of the working catalog. Not so much Milton Nascimento, but the Joe Beam standards and the jazz standards were all part of our bread and butter kind of stuff that we had to do to survive. Now, as far as the album goes, it was 3 years in the making. It didn't really take that long. What it is a matter of doing. There's a pathway that I followed from Will all the way through, working with Jeff Weber. And it's pretty much standard for me how I operate.
I want to talk about the extraordinary group of players on the album, including Vinnie Colaiuta, Tom Scott, Michael Manring, Louis Conti, Lee Sklar, and so many others. When you gather musicians of that caliber in the room, what happens to the music?
First off, interpretation, and then elevation, because the musicianship skills are so high, and these guys are such absolute professionals in every way. Everything is done at a much higher level. So these guys are at the absolute top of their game. So whatever I send their way, they will play it to, better than anybody.
And when you heard these songs come together under their musicianship, you must have been blown away.
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. It was pretty awesome being able to track live with my heroes and some of the best in the world, and actually be able to hang with them and contribute. Because most of the album was actually, all the rhythm section part was done live, bass, drums, guitar, keyboards, and even horns. 2 tunes we just totally tracked on live with vocals. That was Palomino and American Heartland. Both of those tunes were done. I think we did maybe 3 takes on them, and then maybe 1 or 2 corrections, but the vocals were in. We did the backing vocals, the background vocals. Those were layered in later, but Lola did her main part on American Heartland right there with us. So
And Palomino's your first single.
It is. Yeah.
That's coming out soon.
It releases February 20. That's today.
And many listeners know you for the new age acoustic textures, but this song leans into alternative jazz and Brazilian tones and feel.
Yeah, originally, like I said earlier, I was first call artist in St. Louis for almost 20 years. So, working full time, I had pretty much of an authentic firsthand knowledge of Brazilian practice in order to survive as a musician. Although I am, I guess, noted with a lot of my work with Will Ackerman through, with acoustic new age music. Even though this music may not reflect this, again, I'm deeply rooted in the jazz tradition. That's kind of where I started, and I feel that I'm just taking what I've learned and moving it forward as an artist. What that means is I've essentially had the opportunity to expand and develop kind of a creative arc for my improvisation and composition. Along the way, I've been able to incorporate many styles, and I can kind of walk through them freely because they are a part of my DNA. And, I earned a living doing it, so I really know this music as a deep.
And where does this album sit for you? Is it like a homecoming, a new chapter, both? Where is it for you?
I really love this album because it showcases so many musical facets of what I can offer under one umbrella. And I was able to showcase a lot of the skills I've developed and honed as an arranger and composer. This isn't really a new chapter, but more of like a continuing stream. So this is not really a home. I just see it more as, okay, this is where I'm at right now. And that's kind of how Jeff saw it as well, which is why I was able to do what I did.
And there are some great covers on this album. It's really hard to reduce songs like Wichita Lineman. It's been covered 1,000 times, but you crushed this on so many levels. The chart is gorgeous. Your playing on electric and acoustic is brilliant. The vocals are super tasty. The cello is perfect. That Brazilian flow again. Tell me about Wichita Lineman.
In my way of thinking, Wichita Lineman is basically the definitive song from the 1960s. I grew up listening to this and always felt a strong connection to it for some reason, at an emotive level, visual level, historic connection, at all levels. My last album, Land of Enchantment, actually had, by the time I got to Phoenix, and this is what I consider a follow-up to that. I was actually playing the song live as well in my sets, around town. So I had time to kind of check out the chord progressions. I changed it a little bit, chord progression. I also changed the lyric. I didn't really change it. I just made it more of a vocalese. So I put lyric in, you know, select lyric sections with the melody, and I wrote some vocal parts with Lola for Lola and Laura Val. Whenever you get two singers together, the magic occurs, and I was really looking for that Sergio Mendes kind of sound, and I think they delivered that very well. I popped in the cello because I originally was going to layer the cello 3 times, but Judy Kang's cello sounded so good, we just wound up tracking it solo, and she did a beautiful job. And I really, really loved the way this came out. I let Lola kind of go on the back of the end of the song, and she delivered such a beautiful solo at the end of it.
And the song Both Sides Now, it's like a prayer. Beautiful opening, the vocals gorgeous, the arrangement is kind of space age ambient. Michael Mandring on bass is exceptional. Again, you're covering a song brilliantly. Tell me about Both Sides Now.
The history of this tune is actually the tune that started Joni's career. I mean, that was the first tune that was recorded by Judy Collins. It's gone on to have many versions. I actually took inspiration from the cello part of that original recording. From about 2015 to 2020, I was in an ensemble. I had my own ensemble with Michael, Lola, Jeff Haynes, Pramik Tubbs, all the Wyndham Hill / Imaginary Road crew, and we were crossing the country doing concerts from about 2015 to 2020. And the second set, I would always have Michael and Lola open it, with this tune. And so I decided, well, why not put this on actually, my wife said, why don't you have them do this on your album? I said, really? Okay. So I did. I wrote an arrangement for it. I used the opening section. I opened that up for Michael and Lola to try to kind of just do what they do, in concert. And then, to put it more into a recorded kind of vibe, I wound up, just using one of my favorite instrumentations, which is acoustic guitar percussion with Luis Conte, Michael on fretless bass. I wrote a beautiful cello part for Judy, and then Lola on piano and voice. And it's just what I consider, I call it contemporary folk. There's a few other tunes on the album, such as Clouds Above Golden Fields and Witchy Tie, the postlude, are both within that contemporary folk vein, which crosses into New Age as well. And so I just had a lot of fun doing that piece. I love it.
American Heartland is the incredible new album by Todd Mosby. It releases April 3rd. The first single, Palomino, is out February 20th. Check out Todd and his music at toddmosbymusic.com. Learn about American Heartland at toddmosbymusic.com/American Heartland, and I'll include all the links in the YouTube description. My thanks to Todd Mosby for joining me today for this Artist Spotlight. I'm Shambhu, and until next time, stay open, stay inspired, and keep listening.